Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Reaction by federal party leaders has been strong, with the threat from U.S. President-elect Donald Trump of a 25% tariff on Canadian goods. Political columnist Brian Lilly says our immigration system is severely broken and is costing Canadian taxpayers billions of dollars. And the Lethbridge District exhibition is facing a criminal investigation. We will explain why.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he will call a meeting with all of the premiers to discuss U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's threat of imposing a 25% tariff on Canadian goods. He said he's already chatted with Trump on the phone about the potential levy.
I had a good call with Donald Trump last night again. We obviously talked about laying out the facts, talking about how the intense and effective connections between our two countries flow back and forth. We talked about some of the challenges that we can work on together. It was a good call. This is something that we can do, laying out the facts, moving forward in constructive ways. This is a relationship that we know takes a certain amount of working on, and that's what we'll do. One of the really important things is that we be all pulling together on this. The Team Canada approach is what works. That's where, putting aside partisanship, that's where I reached out immediately to Doug Ford to agree with him that we would have a First Ministers meeting this week to talk about the United States. Talked with François Legault and some other premiers as well. There's work to do, but we know how to do it.
Now, federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has also spoken out about Trump's threat of imposing that tariff on Canadian products. He's also calling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to not quadruple the carbon tax in April. Poilievre says the potential incoming tariffs from the Americans, along with a large increase in the carbon tax, could cripple our economy.
This was an irresponsible policy to begin with, but combining this kind of crippling energy tax increase with potential tariffs from Donald Trump would push our economy into a nightmare and a tailspin. So let's put partisanship aside and axe the tax. Second, the Prime Minister has to put aside partisanship and, in the spirit of Team Canada, cancel his energy cap, which would see Alberta and Saskatchewan produce 35% less energy at a time when we need those jobs. It is our biggest industry and our biggest export. The incoming American president says he wants to cut gas prices in half. Well, the only way to do it will be to import more clean Canadian energy, so the Prime Minister has to stop this assault on our biggest industry.
Sun political columnist Brian Lilly says the 25% tariffs on Canadian goods amounts to around $26 million per day to the cost of oil being exported to the United States, our biggest trading partner. Mr. Lilly says there's a way to avoid these tariffs if we mitigate Trump's concern over drugs coming into the United States.
On the drugs issue, he specifically mentioned fentanyl. We're not a major fentanyl producer, but there was that story about the super lab in BC just a couple of weeks ago. He will definitely have seen that. We've got to make sure he also sees stories like the big bust in October with the former Canadian snowboarder at the center of it. That was a drug transaction network that spread from Mexico to California to the U.S. Midwest to Alberta to Ontario. We've got to show that we will work with them on drug issues, but we really need to get our immigration system under control to deal with the fact that so many people are using Canada as a backdoor to the U.S.
Mr. Lilly will, in fact, discuss why he feels our immigration system is broken. He'll have details coming up later in our show. Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says her government is hoping a temporary break on GST will address a vibe session that has gripped Canadians. The Liberals announced last week that beginning December 14th, the goods and services tax will be taken off a number of items for 2 months to help with the affordability crunch. After close to 14 months of fighting across the Israel-Lebanon border, a ceasefire is set to begin at 4 a.m. local time. Israel officially approved the deal brokered with the U.S. in agreement with the terrorist group Hezbollah. The Israel Defense Forces, however, kept pummeling Beirut, Lebanon's capital, and its southern suburbs with its most intense wave of attacks since the start of the conflict. U.S. President Joe Biden praised the ceasefire agreement and says his administration will keep pushing for an additional ceasefire in Gaza. Montreal Mayor Valérie Plante says she's proud of the work of the Montreal Police Force in the wake of the recent pro-Palestinian and anti-NATO protests that turned violent. She says, quote, "Professional vandals are behind the hijacking of the event," but adds that nonviolent protests are still part of a healthy democracy.
We've all seen the videos of what happened on Friday. People just destroying. They were doing it with a big smile on their face, having no sense of respect for property. The right to protest is within our society. It is protected, fine, but not to have such hatred speeches or to break things just for the sake of it. That's why we call them like professional vandals, right? That's one way for some people to get. I don't even know if it's getting their voice heard. I think it's just using a cause to break things. And again, I want to say even to put people's security at risk. And to me, this is not what, protesting is protected, is a sign of a great democracy, and it's protected by law, and it's a good thing. But those people, those vandals, to me, are just like thinking of them. They're not thinking of the entire cause and the effect it will have on other people's as well.
Legal arguments have begun in London, Ontario in the sexual assault case involving 5 members of the 2018 World Junior Hockey Team. Dylan Dubé, Carter Hart, Michael McLeod, Cal Foote, and Alex Formenton have all been charged in an incident that allegedly took place in the city back in June of 2018.
This is one of the first times that we've had some of the players in court for this case. So today we had Alex Formenton, Michael McLeod, and Dylan Dubé here. Unfortunately, we can't really say anything of what's going on in court due to a publication ban that's meant to protect the accused's right to a fair trial. 5 players who were on the 2018 World Junior hockey team have been accused of sexually assaulting a woman in a hotel in London, Ontario in 2018. There was initially a police investigation that was put on hold in 2019, and then it was reopened down the line, and the players were charged earlier this year. This has been a case that has really shone a spotlight on the issues surrounding how sports organizations and society at large, I guess, looks into allegations of sexual assault.
All 5 hockey players are expected to plead not guilty when the jury trial begins in April. Well, we experienced a mainly clear but chilly day today in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, are we reaching that point where we may have to begin plugging in our vehicles overnight now?
Well, I guess it depends on your vehicle and your battery. Now, I think the rule of thumb is minus 15 you should plug in. So considering it's going to get down to minus 19 this evening, you may want to consider that for tonight. Tomorrow on Wednesday, going to be very much similar to today with that daytime high of minus 11, which is a little cooler than seasonal right now. And we're going to see a little bit more cloud coverage tomorrow as well than we did today. And also not as much wind like today, only 15 kilometers per hour. As the evening approaches, we're going to get down to minus 17 tomorrow night. So again, maybe plug in that vehicle. And here's the good news. We are, once we get past this really cold stretch, we're going to see some plus days ahead. And I'll be back later in the show with the 7-day forecast. Hal?
Looking forward to those plus days. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Well, it appears as though the former board of the Lethbridge and District exhibition could be in some hot water. A summary report from Deloitte of the LDE has been handed over to the Economic Crimes Unit of the Lethbridge Police Service for investigation. The report contained results from its review of the Lethbridge and District exhibition. It revealed significant issues involving the planning, execution, governance, use of funds, and council communication by LDE throughout the process of building and opening of the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Centre. City Manager Lloyd Brierley says the report highlights a serious mismanagement of funds to the tune of $32 million of additional capital expenditures.
Deloitte's report details a serious level of mismanagement of the more than $70 million in public funding provided to LDE by the province of Alberta, the city of Lethbridge, Lethbridge County, and the federal government. While Deloitte's summary report will be shared on the city website, I want to highlight some of the most pressing issues discovered. It is now clear that the information shared with Council at the early stages of project planning and decision-making was incomplete. Expenses filed by both the CEO and board members indicated that money was spent on items such as gifts, luxury hotels, event tickets, alcohol at private functions, car washes, televisions, and other various forms of entertainment. Without itemized receipts, it's difficult to determine if these expenses were incurred for a valid business purpose. Items purchased for the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center were sometimes lavish, including over $331,000 on custom-made reclaimed furniture and fixtures.
Wow. Close to 2,000 residents in the Crow's Nest Pass here in Alberta took part in a vote on Monday on whether or not the municipality would support the Grassy Mountain coal mining project. The vote passed with 71.7% of residents voting in favor of the project. While the referendum won't influence the decision of the project moving forward, the municipality will now take steps to promote it on behalf of the residents. BCN's Landon Hickok spoke with the Crow's Nest Pass Mayor Blair Painter, who listed all the economic benefits he says the coal mine would bring to his community.
Why don't you tell me about the results from last night and kind of what comes next for the people of Crow's Nest Pass with this result?
If this project is to move ahead, it's a big deal for the Crow's Nest Pass. Potential for 300-ish employees for the project, 25-plus year lifespan. And then when it's completed, there will be a reclamation so that we can fix that area just north of us that presently has been left in not such a great condition. It is category 4 land. Not pristine mountaintop that has been out there in the press. It will increase our tax base, which will reduce the burden on our residents tax-wise. With the 300 employees, not all of them will live here, but we will get perhaps a third. And typically, it will be younger people that are coming to work at this project. We're anticipating growth in our school enrollment, plus it will strengthen our hospital. That's always a worry for our community that they're going to shut down a hospital or whatever. So, this will actually help to strengthen that. It'll strengthen our business community. Plus, we feel that it will add some additional commercial businesses in our area.
Now, not all are happy with the results of the referendum. David Thomas, who's with the Crow's Nest Headwaters, says the fight against the potential coal mine for his region is far from over.
There's no way that a small group of people in a referendum in Crow's Nest Pass should determine the fate of the Crow's Nest headwaters and the river that flows east out of the mountains. That's everybody's water.
Alberta's official opposition is speaking out against UCP members giving themselves a $270 increase to the MLA accommodations allowance. That raises it 14% from $1,930 a month to just over $2,200. NDP MLA Christina Gray says with so many Albertans struggling financially right now, it was poor timing for the UCP to give themselves a raise.
Right now, Alberta has the highest inflation in the country. Albertans have the highest utility bills in the country. And Albertans have the highest auto insurance in the country, which Smith has just announced will go even higher over the next 2 years. Alberta currently has the highest unemployment west of the Maritimes, and yet Alberta has the lowest minimum wage in Canada, something the UCP have not changed or raised in any way in over 5 years. So today's decision by the UCP members of the Member Services Committee to give themselves a 14% increase in MLA accommodation allowance is completely unacceptable and very out of touch.
This is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Now, during the month of November, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women is also being recognized. Violence against women hurts all of us. Now, in an effort to help eliminate violence against women, the YWCA Lethbridge and District joined in 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. The campaign, led by the United Nations, is called Unite. Lorraine Johansson, who's with the YWCA marketing and communications team here in the city, discusses what they're doing to help our community.
Part of the things that happened in November is the beginning of the 16 days of activism, which began yesterday. And that culminates on the 10th of December. And there are a few organizations throughout Lethbridge that are hosting ceremonies and events and informational booths and educational sessions. The Polytechnic and the university both are having us in 2 different tabling events and ceremonies throughout these 16 days. In 2022, the YWCA's crisis line, which operates 24/7, 365, answered over 2,300 crisis calls. Numbers for 23 and 24 are not going any lower. Very important for the community at large to continue the work and the awareness. Statistics and studies show that approximately 2 out of every 5 women has been affected by domestic violence. Approximately 80% of family or domestic violence incidents don't get reported. As the YWCA, we will be here to continue to support those in our community that need our services. And in turn, we welcome and are grateful for every ounce of community support that we receive in order to continue our work.
According to the United Nations, last year, over 51,000 women were killed by the hands of their partners or family members. That means 1 woman was killed every 10 minutes. Well, it was fairly cold today in Lethbridge, but at least we enjoyed a little bit of sunshine earlier today, and the sunny but cooler conditions should remain for most of the week. Full weather details are on deck. We are well below our average high for this time of year, which is around +1. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, any chance Lethbridge will get back onto the plus side of things anytime soon?
Well, I do have some good news, because once we get past this little cold stretch that we're in right now, we're going to see those temperatures rise to pluses as we get into early next week there. But until then, we're looking at -11 for a daytime high tomorrow, and then we're going to rise up to -8 on Thursday, -10 Friday, -9 on a Saturday. Again, that's kind of within that range now for this time of year. And then we're going to jump up to +3 and +5 on Sunday and Monday, which will be above the average high for this time of year. Now, speaking of which, that average high is 1 degree, average low -10 for this time of year. 17 was our record high on this day. That happened back in 1939, and in 1985 we were sitting at a chilly -31. 8:01. That is when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this afternoon at 4:36 p.m., giving us now 8 hours, 35 minutes of daylight. So 2 minutes a little bit longer, 2 minutes longer is what I'm supposed to be saying there. 2 minutes longer than we saw yesterday. 7 degrees for a high in Victoria. Tomorrow we're seeing a chance of showers. Vancouver as well. Their high of 6 degrees. Lots of sunshine across Alberta tomorrow with a little bit of cloud coverage. However, chilly temperatures. -14 in Edmonton and -10 in Calgary. With the wind chill, those are going to feel more like the -20s. Speaking of wind chill, very cold wind chill in Saskatoon tomorrow. -28 is what it's going to feel like, and that means a risk of frostbite. -15 the daytime high there. 30% chance of flurries. Same thing in Regina with that 30% chance of flurries and -15, and Winnipeg looking at a high of -7 tomorrow with some partly cloudy skies. As we look to the central part of the country, we're seeing a little bit of snow and a little bit of rain. We got 30% of each in Toronto tomorrow happening. 4 degrees for the high there. We're seeing 4s all around here, mainly cloudy skies in Ottawa and Montreal, seeing a 60% chance of flurries there. As we move on over into the Maritimes, instead of flurries, we're actually looking at showers. So as we get over into Fredericton, we're going to be seeing a 60% chance of showers there. 7 for the high, 7 also the high in Halifax and Charlottetown, looking at 60% chance of showers in those cities as well. 4 degrees for the high in St. John's tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. Could see a bit of drizzle in the morning there as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Business and political leaders in Canada say there will be a serious pain if Donald Trump follows through on his pledge to impose a 25% tariff on all Canadian goods. They say, however, that it would hurt the United States as well. The threat was met with a call to action by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. Officials there say we need to adapt our approach to trade talks, saying, quote, being America's nice neighbor won't get us anywhere. Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters President Dennis Darby says the tariffs would be detrimental to his sector. The Bank of Canada's Rhys Mendez says allowing for a period of price declines may sound tempting, but it would ultimately be more painful for Canadians. Mendez emphasized the importance of keeping inflation at the 2% target. The deputy governor said the central bank would have to exert more pain on the economy with high interest rates to bring down prices, an outcome which may leave people feeling worse off.
To do our job well at the bank, we need to understand how our policies affect people and businesses across the country. That's why I'm meeting with business and community leaders from several sectors while I'm here. And, our job at the bank is to keep inflation low and stable. So we aim to keep it centered on a 2% target. That's how we ensure the economy works best for Canadians. Inflation has now come down significantly and is back at our 2% target. We want it to stay there. For this reason, we decided last month to lower our policy interest rate by 50 basis points to 3.75%. Our focus is now on ensuring that inflation remains low, stable, and predictable.
Mendez says bringing a period of lower prices would also affect expectations of inflation, making it more difficult for the central bank to stimulate spending in the case of an economic downturn. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 5 points of the day to 25,405. The Dow was up 123 basis points to 44,860. The S&P 500 was up 34 points to 6,021, and the Nasdaq was also up 119 points to 19,173. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 6 cents to 68.88 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 17 cents to $3.48 US. Gold was up $21.36 to $2,633.06 US an ounce, and silver was up 14 cents to $30.44 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.35 per bushel, barley is at $6.53, canola is at $13.04, and corn is at $7.54 per bushel. Live cattle December contract was up 40 cents to $186.90. Feeder cattle January contract was up $2.62 to $258.10, and lean hogs December contract was up $1.12 to $83.10. And the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours and currently sits at 71.20 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, a summary report from Deloitte of the Lethbridge and District exhibition has been handed over to the Economic Crimes Unit of the Lethbridge Police Service for investigation. The report revealed significant issues involving the planning, execution, use of funds, and council communication by the LDE throughout the process of the building and opening of the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Centre. City Manager Lloyd Brierley says the report highlights a serious mismanagement of funds to the tune of $32 million of additional capital expenditures. Many in our country are quite concerned over the proposal of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's proposed 25% tariff on Canadian goods. You can include Sun political columnist Brian Lilley in that conversation, who will explain shortly how damaging it could be and how we can maybe potentially change Trump's mind on the issue. Watch that interview coming up shortly. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening a 25% tariff on Canadian goods. That adds up to about $26 million a day to the cost of oil exported to the United States, our biggest trading partner. This would be quite the hit to the Canadian economy. Now, to chat about this in more detail, and the gentleman who worked the numbers out for us is Sun political columnist Brian Lilley, who joins us from Toronto. Brian, there's a lot of chatter about how Canada could potentially retaliate, but you say that we can actually avoid these tariffs if we act properly. Can you explain?
Well, Donald Trump has said you have to fix the border or face 25% tariffs on all goods. And the immediate reaction of some Canadians is, well, there's no problem with our border. It's the Mexican border that's the problem. But then you look at the numbers and you say, well, actually, we're becoming a problem. And Tom Homan, who's the new incoming border czar, we talked about him before. He's the guy from Western New York, grew up just south of Kingston, still calls that home. He had moved back there and the president's called him to go to Washington. He knows the problems on the southern border, or sorry, well, our southern border, their northern border. He knows the problems about people smuggling, drug smuggling in places like the Thousand Islands near Kingston, about Roxham Road, about the vast 49th parallel, where, yes, you can easily smuggle things across, and he wants them addressed. He has called the Canada-US border a national security threat. He's the guy with Trump's ear. He's saying it, Trump saying, okay, fix the border or you can face these tariffs. I looked at the numbers, Hal. We've had an 82% increase over the last 2 years in the number of people encountered by U.S. Customs and Border Protection Service at the Canadian border. 198,000 people now, an 82% increase from just 2 years ago. Now, that's small compared to Mexico, where it's 2.1 million. We're only about 9.3% of the total land border interceptions or encounters. But what that means is we've got a lot of people coming from Canada and going to the US, either trying to enter illegally or, in many cases, showing up and they declare asylum. I'll give you an example. 46,000 Indian nationals. So they're not Canadian citizens, they're not permanent residents, they're Indian nationals who've come here on a visitor visa, on a temporary foreign workers visa, on a student visa. And then they go down to the States. 46,000, that's a small city. 36,000 of them, by the way, are single unattached adults, mostly males. China's the next biggest with 12,000. That's an issue for the Americans when our interceptions are going up, Mexico's are going down. Twice as many people deemed to be on the terror watch list are caught trying to cross the Canada-US border than the US-Mexico border. These are issues that the Americans want addressed, and we need to address them. On the drugs issue, he specifically mentioned fentanyl. We're not a major fentanyl producer, but there was that story about the super lab in BC just a couple of weeks ago. He will definitely have seen that. We've got to make sure he also sees stories like the big bust in October with the former Canadian snowboarder at the center of it. That was a drug transaction network that spread from Mexico to California to the US Midwest to Alberta to Ontario. We've got to show that we will work with them on drug issues, but we really need to get our immigration system under control to deal with the fact that so many people are using Canada as a backdoor to the US.
Now, our premier here in Alberta, Daniel Smith, has gone on record, Brian, saying that Americans have legitimate concerns. I know you were recently with Ontario Premier Doug Ford, and you've also been speaking with Pierre Poilievre's team. What are other leaders saying in this regard?
Similar things. Ontario Premier Doug Ford was not as forceful in saying the American concerns are legitimate, but he held a news conference. I got a couple of questions to him and said, look, 198,000 people, is that worrisome? He said, yeah, we need to address it. He said, but we also have illegal goods coming in from the States. We have people coming into Canada illegally. We've got to work together. Premier Ford is currently the chair of the Council of the Federation. In fact, Premier Smith is going to be coming to Toronto in about 2.5 weeks' time for a big conference there and then speaking here. Well, as chair of that council, Premier Ford was on the phone with all the premiers last night and with the prime minister after he had spoken to President-elect Trump and said, look, we need a first ministers meeting. So that's taking place Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pierre Poilievre, he's come out and said, let's take a Team Canada approach, but here's what you have to do. And he said that you've got to address the Americans' concerns. And he added in not just the ones that Trump mentioned, but said, look, successive American administrations have been calling on Canada to increase defense spending, and it's not happening. You've got to look after their valid concerns with us, or we're going to be punished.
Now, let's circle back to the meeting that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has with the premiers coming up this week, Brian. Do you get the sense that the Trudeau government takes the issue when it comes to immigration seriously with the incoming Trump administration and maybe react accordingly, or will he maybe mishandle this and put our economy at serious risk?
I'm worried that it's the latter. I listened to the Prime Minister at a scrum today, and he kept talking about, well, we've got to explain the facts to them, meaning the facts about trade. And I've described it this way to a few people. The Americans are upset at us about the border. And if we turn around, and they're threatening tariffs, which would hurt the economy. If we turn around and our answer to them is, well, but we do so much trade, this will hurt your people, this will hurt your jobs, they're going to say, we don't care. It's like when your wife is angry at you because you keep leaving your socks on the couch, and she raises it with you and says, stop leaving the socks on the couch. And you say, but honey, the garage is so clean. You're answering with something she's not upset about. And that's what Trudeau sounds like he is doing. Melanie Joly was a bit better in a news conference, but this is also a government that broke the immigration system. It took them almost a year to realize how badly they had messed it up. And now they're saying, we've got over 7% of our population are temporary residents, students and temporary foreign workers. And millions of them are coming up for the time to leave. Their time is done. We have no way of dealing with that. And what are we learning now? Tens of thousands of them are going to the United States and declaring asylum, which plugs up their system. I'm not sure that they have the wherewithal. If they do it right, if they take it seriously, then they can. Will they do the work? I just have my doubts.
And Brian just reminded me of some socks to pick up when I get home here. Now, fixing our immigration system, which seems to be a big part of the irritants for the Americans, as you just discussed, would also benefit Canada. Now, you recently wrote about just how broken our system is, in particular for refugees, and how it's costing Canadian taxpayers billions upon billions of dollars. Can you explain?
So there was a story that came out last week that the federal interim health program, I believe that's what it's called. This is the program to provide healthcare for asylum seekers, refugee claimants. It used to cost in 2016 about $60 million. It's now set to cost $411 million. And people were shocked. And I said, well, hold on a minute. That's just part of the equation. I looked at what the province of Ontario spends. Now, the numbers will be different because Ontario and Quebec get the lion's share of asylum seekers, but you can check in municipal budgets and provincial budgets across Alberta, and you'll find similar increases. But I'll give you the Ontario numbers I have. The province of Ontario spent $1 billion last year on different programs for asylum seekers that the feds have let in. So that's $1 billion to the province. 1 out of 4 people in Ontario on the welfare system are refugee claimants. 1 in 4. 60% of the shelter beds in Toronto and in Ottawa are taken up by refugee claimants. Things are so bad that François Legault, Quebec's premier, has said we can't afford another Roxham Road. He's talking about the cost in the school system, in the health system, to his province. He sent their provincial police down to the border to start patrolling it. I'm not sure what jurisdiction they have, but if it stops people from going in both directions, maybe that's a good thing and deals with the Trump issue. But at every level, this is costing municipal governments, provincial governments, and federal governments. And again, Justin Trudeau has not been willing to fix it. He's broken the permanent resident portion of the immigration system. He's broken the temporary residents, and he's broken the refugee system, which is up dramatically, not with people who are fleeing war, but people who want a better life for themselves. I don't blame them, but they're economic migrants coming in, declaring asylum, and then it's almost 4 years before a case is heard. That's 4 years of people being on public assistance. It's not a good way to run the system.
Brian, a NATO meeting in Montreal this week drew a lot of negative attention for Canada. I mean, on one hand over the protests and the other for lack of defense spending. Do you think this maybe gave Canada a bit of a black eye in Montreal?
Yeah, and especially in the United States, where both of these things were noticed. The anti-Semitic protest, I mean, a bunch of the media outlets that covered it called it an anti-NATO protest. And that was the Canadian press. And, look, it wasn't a conspiracy among media outlets. A lot of us subscribe to Canadian press, but their headline called it an anti-NATO protest. People were going around making Nazi salutes and saying the final solution is coming for you towards Jewish Montrealers, significant Jewish population in Montreal. They were chanting for the Intifada, only one solution, Intifada revolution. And, genocidal chants like that being sung as they smash windows, burn cars, run rampant through Montreal. And what was our PM doing? He was dancing at the Taylor Swift concert. That all got picked up by American media. And there were, this is the NATO Parliamentary Association meetings. They were talking about the fact that Canada doesn't spend enough on defense, including top Americans on the Republican side who are about to become more powerful. The Democrats have been complaining about us not spending enough for years. The Trump guys are going to complain louder. And like the border issue, maybe Trump turns around and says, more tariffs if you don't increase defense spending. Or Canadian companies are allowed to sell to the American military. It's very lucrative for our businesses. Maybe he turns around and says, you know what? You're not pulling your weight. We're getting rid of that. We're going to face an awful lot of problems that I'm not saying we deserve this, but there are problems that we have self-generated by failing to do the hard work of governing. The Trudeau government is a government that likes to do press releases and announcements. They don't like to do the hard work of governing the way the Harper government did, the Martin government, the Chrétien government did. You could disagree with their policies, but they focused on governing. These guys focus on optics and going to Taylor Swift concerts.
So, Brian, let's talk a bit about some of these protests, which seem to be getting more and more violent lately, all across North America, including in our major centers like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. Where are we dropping the ball? Is the municipalities working with the police? Is the province? Is the federal government? What are you seeing right now?
Well, I don't think that you're getting protests quite as bad out in Calgary or Edmonton. And in fact, the universities in those two cities quickly cleared out an attempt to set up encampments. We have not had that in Toronto or Montreal because of weak leadership. University of Toronto had incredibly weak leadership. The police forces in Toronto and Montreal have dropped the ball repeatedly, Toronto specifically, because of weak leadership from the chief who takes instruction from the mayor. I know politicians love to say that they don't direct police, but believe me, they do. The police know which side their bread is buttered on. And they also know that if, in the case of Toronto, if they were to crack down, they would not get political backing for the crackdown from someone like Mayor Olivia Chow, who has said, those crazies voted for me. So, this is not something that we should be dealing with, but unfortunately we are. You had a rabbi who was told to get away from a protest because he was disturbing the peace. You're an identifiable Jew. We ask you to leave. Why? So you can protect the pro-terrorists mob that's walking through the streets of Montreal? Apparently that's what the Montreal police decided.
Wow. Brian, on another note, a group of healthcare workers in Ontario have filed a class action lawsuit over vaccine mandates. Now, you've been following this story fairly closely. Do you think they'll be successful?
Based on what's happened with other court cases and arbitrations, I don't think so. If you had asked me pre-pandemic, I would have said yes, because the Ontario Nurses Association fought against mandatory flu shots and mandatory masks prior to the pandemic, and they won. And that's why it was always puzzling to me that organizations like nurses associations, by the way, nurses associations across Canada had done that pre-pandemic. And then we all lost our minds during COVID and lost our sense of where the state should end and you begin, and agreed that mandates had to be everywhere. So there have been several arbitration decisions on people that lost their jobs. That's not exactly the same as a civil suit. The standards are different, but they've all lost, and I've seen other court cases where they've lost. So we'll have to wait and see. But also in this one, I think the target is wrong. They're suing the province and the provincial chief medical officer. The province is not the employer, and all the province said in Ontario's case was, you have to have a policy on vaccination. They didn't tell them that you have to have a policy of mandatory vaccination or lose your jobs. They just said, come up with a policy on it. Some hospitals demanded vaccination, others did not. And so I think that makes this lawsuit difficult to cross the finish line.
And Brian, for a lot of our viewers who enjoy our Q&As here on Bridge City News, and especially on our YouTube channel, you're taking a bit of a break going on a Caribbean cruise, so we're not going to chat with you on December 3rd to the 10th. You're back, what, on the 17th, I believe?
17th, and I'll be attending a lunch with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith to hear what she has to say about the need for Alberta's energy sector for a healthy Canada. But by the way, I got to say, being inundated with those ads here in Ontario, I'm sure you're not seeing them in Alberta because that'd be a waste of money, but they're being shown in news programs, big sporting events. They're everywhere here, both from the province and companies like Cenovus.
That's amazing. Looking forward to our next Q&A, Brian, and safe travels. Enjoy your trip here.
Thank you.
You know, apparently it's not uncommon for people to walk over 160,000 kilometers in their lifetime. That's a whole lot of walking, a whole lot of adventures, and sometimes a lot of discomfort if you're someone who has some foot problems. We're going to dive in and talk about some of the foot problems and solutions today with Emily Soper. She's a certified pedorthist with a degree in kinesiology. She's also the owner of Nexus Orthotics in Medicine Hat, Alberta. Emily, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So what are some of the more common type of foot problems that people are experiencing right now?
Yeah, some of the most common ones that I see here in the office are probably bunions, hammer toes, plantar fasciitis, Morton's neuroma, to name a few. But yeah, it's pretty common that those four pop up weekly.
You know, as a matter of fact, I experienced a little bit of the hammer toe situation myself because I grew so fast, my feet grew so big when I was a kid. My parents couldn't keep up with the new shoes, and the toes don't exactly sit flat. They're a little bit curled here. So you see a lot more of that with kids today?
Yeah, I do see a lot with that. I mean, it's hard for parents to keep up with how fast the kids grow, and kids sometimes don't always tell you. And it's hard to buy a shoe beginning of the year and then have to replace it again in December. So, especially with today's costs, I do see it more often than not. But again, there's a hereditary factor in some cases where the second toe is longer, and then in that case, over time, it definitely claws back out of the way.
So what advice would you give to parents? Maybe buy more sandals for the kids?
Yeah, no, not so much. It depends on the kid too, but you always want to make sure that you're getting a thumb space from the end of their longest toe to the end of the shoe when buying shoes at the store, for sure.
What are some of the causes, Emily, of a lot of the foot issues we're seeing today, and are they even preventable?
Yeah, a lot of the causes I would say are probably shoes. That's probably the number one. A lot of the shoes that we buy are not the greatest, and people actually don't really know what to buy for what specific activities they're doing, as well as it can be even job related, like working on concrete all day can wear and tear on the body, and even dress shoes for sure if you have to dress up more for work as well.
So I guess walking on the concrete all day is not very helpful, I guess, for a lot of your foot and back issues?
I guess you could walk through Costco and ask some of those employees working there, and they probably are a little grumpy and tired from standing on concrete all day. Yeah, it is. Our bodies are not designed to walk on concrete, so it definitely plays a big factor in pain for sure.
So how much does the foot really impact our backs? So if we have foot problems, that relates to some of maybe the back issues that we have as well.
Yes, it definitely can. So a lot of times if you're not walking, your gait's a little bit off. Let's say you're wearing, have you ever seen those kids wear UGG boots and they're wearing them inward? That excess strain where the shoe and the foot is rotating in can definitely strain all the way up to the back over time. So it does play a big factor in back pain for sure.
How dangerous is it? I've seen a lot of times on social media, a lot of advertisements for footwear. You know, people like, hey, buy these shoes, you can buy, but you're not actually trying them on to see if it's a good, proper fit. People are just buying it online. How dangerous is that? So when you get them, you try them on, it's like, they're not very comfortable at all.
Yeah, I mean, I even get advertisements on Facebook and Google all the time because obviously I'm looking at shoes on a regular basis. I've had some people who've had success. I've even bought shoes online before too, but generally I know the brand before I'm buying it and I already know what size I am. So it's a risk. If they have a good return policy, maybe you could try it out. But a lot of the stuff online is geared towards let's get more cushion on your feet. You don't need cushion. Most of the time, we need more structured shoes on concrete, which is the opposite to what people think.
Really? So you need a lot more of that support? What about people that have flat feet? How can you really help them? The arch has really fallen.
Yeah, flat feet. I mean, it just generally depends if you've had like flat feet your whole life. Some people with flat feet their whole life generally sometimes don't have any pain, but there are some who definitely do. If you just think of it as a car, if you have low shock on your car or high, you generally feel those bumps along the way a little bit more.
How common is plantar fasciitis? Maybe you can explain to our viewers exactly what it is.
Yeah, so plantar fasciitis, it's pretty common. I'm sure you've heard someone or know someone who's had it. You've heard that dreaded plantar fasciitis kind of kicking around. So it just generally means plantar fascia, and then itis means inflammation in the foot. So it's just a pain in that plantar part of your foot. So it can be caused by all kinds of things. I would say the big one is a tight calf, actually. Your calf gets a little bit tight from sitting or standing on concrete without stretching. It can definitely impact your foot there for sure.
So what are some of the symptoms we should really look out for?
So some of the symptoms would be that first startup pain in the morning, those first few steps when you get out of bed. So let's say your heel or your arch is hurting when you wake up and you have to go to the bathroom, and then it eases off after those 10 steps. A nice stabbing pain in the heel is a good one, or in the inside of the heel as well. Also, sometimes people explain that it feels like you're taking a rubber band and stretching it across your arch during the day. So it can increase the more you walk on those first few steps for sure when you sit down, like after lunch or dinner, and get back up.
Can orthotic insoles actually help to treat plantar fasciitis? How do they work?
Yeah, so they definitely can help for sure. So what the orthotics are designed to do is they're designed to distribute plantar pressure throughout your foot so you don't have that high area of strain in the arch. So you add that orthotic in there and it takes some of that strain off every time you're walking. It's kind of like the major science behind it, but a lot of times I'm kind of adding like shoe changes or some exercises to do at home as well to kind of get to the real cause of what's causing this foot problem.
Are the orthotic insoles used maybe as a preventative measure as well?
Yeah, you can definitely use it as a preventative measure. Let's say you have severely high arches, and over time that high arch can lead to a lot of pressure in the ball of your foot and can cause hammertoes and Morton's neuroma and all kinds of issues up there, or maybe even plantar fasciitis. So it can kind of prevent those types of things, or even someone with a very flat foot can help prevent it from getting even more flat. Like especially diabetic patients, actually. If you're diabetic, you should look into more preventative maintenance for later on before you have any issues.
Can you explain what night splints are and how they actually work?
Yeah, night splints. Actually, I have one sitting back here, right beside that knee brace. I'll grab it. So it looks like this. It's basically just stretches your foot while you're sleeping. So if you have a hard time stretching as much as you need to during the day to get rid of plantar fasciitis, the night splint is a bulky option to kind of help. It's usually the last resort if we're really having a hard time getting that flexibility back in the calf.
So Emily, how about potentially just doing foot stretches and using ice packs, or maybe even seeing a reflexologist? Would that help?
Yeah, that's always a good option. We always say stretching first because I think that orthotics aren't the be all and end all the time. There's lots of things that you can do yourself before seeking help. There's lots of good Dr. Google things that will tell you that you can do some stretches at home. And stretches is never a bad thing, for sure.
It's funny, I'm doing some foot stretches right now as we speak, pointing the toes back and forth back under the desk here that you can't see. So maybe that's a good thing as we're talking about it.
Exactly. You can do that just while sitting at your desk.
Emily, can you explain what Achilles tendonitis is and what treatments are readily available?
Yeah, so Achilles tendonitis, again, it's that itis word, inflammation in the Achilles tendon. So Achilles tendonitis. It's basically just an inflammation in the Achilles. So a lot of times, again, tight calf can cause that. But most of the time I see just if you're either rolling out or rolling in, so that abnormal kind of walking that you're doing can cause that extra strain and pull on the Achilles. It's a fun one to treat. It can be a little bit finicky. Sometimes it can take a while to get rid of it, but it is interesting once you do get it right that it kind of just smartens up and goes back to normal.
Now, you talk about proper footwear and the structure of a shoe being inclusive in the proper footwear. What does that actually look like?
Yeah, so I wish I had a shoe for an example for you today, but so soft and squishy things, like generally if you can take the shoe and rotate it and squish it into a ball, I would say don't buy that for any long distance walking for sure. You want a strong heel counter, so meaning that the back of the heel is stiff. So when you have those ones where you can just slide in, that has zero control around the ankle. So again, it will allow your foot to rotate in or out depending on what you're doing. And then wide base of support. So I'm sure you've seen like high heels or like very narrow shoes on the base. That's just generally not supporting your foot at all, and your arch can kind of hang off the side and lead to more pressure in that area. And then as well, size. So size makes the biggest difference. So if you have too tight of shoes or you're wearing those pointed shoes, generally over time, your foot will just kind of go to that way. So you'll end up with bunions, hammer toes, claw toes, all that fun stuff. And a lot of people don't realize that if you squish your foot into something, it doesn't keep it small. It actually makes it bigger over time. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
What advice do you have for the ladies who like to wear a lot of the heels, maybe the 3, 4, even 5-inch heels, you know, over many, many years? What does that do to the foot and to the back?
Yeah, over time, actually, it does a lot of damage. So generally, a lot of women are more prone to bunions because of what we put on our feet. So that pointed toe or the excess pressure on the ball of the foot will just flatten it over time. So your foot will get wider, you'll get bunions, hammer toes. And then if you think about it, if you wear a high heel all day, that just shortens your Achilles. So a lot of women, when they're retiring from wearing high heels or they can't wear them anymore, lack that range of motion. And it's really hard to go back down to a runner. It takes a lot of work. And sometimes we still have to put a heel lift into the shoe because they're just too tight at that point.
Now, if people do actually want to go running or jogging, what should they look for in a good running shoe?
There's so many different shoes on the market. I guess it really depends kind of what kind of heel striker or midfoot or forefoot striker you want to be. So if you strike in the heel, obviously that puts a little bit more pressure onto the knee. So if you're someone who struggles with knee pain, I would suggest going with a lower drop heel to do more of a midfoot strike. Again, you're just going to, it's preference for people who are running. So there's lots of really cushion ones where it promotes more of a heel strike and then, more midfoot striker. So I guess it's preference because there's a lot of different options for running that you can do.
Emily, let's talk a bit about compression stockings. What are they and what are their true benefits?
Now, compression stockings are actually fairly beneficial for the majority of the population. If you have no issue getting blood flow down, I would say you could probably get away with wearing them daily. Over time, the body just has a hard time getting the blood back up to your heart. The blood doesn't get up just magically. It actually gets up by the calf contracting. So if you have a sitting job or you're standing for long periods of time, there's potential that the blood just pools over time. So if you think about your veins, they are like a backflow valve. Every time your calf contracts, the veins open and then they close. So when you have excess pressure down and then the next level pressure, they get leaky. And that's how you can kind of develop with varicose veins, just some swelling, like edema, that kind of stuff over time. So they are beneficial for the majority of the public, especially women who tend to have a little bit more strain from pregnancies and issues like that. But definitely flying for sure. I would recommend flying with compression socks for pretty much everybody.
So apart from compression stockings, does it make a difference what type of socks a person may wear?
Not necessarily. I guess we do sweat a lot more with our hands and our feet, but it's, again, generally on preference. Natural fibers generally work a lot better for sweat. So if you're wearing something that's a little bit more natural, like merino wool or cotton, it generally is a little bit less sweaty. But again, that's a preference thing. If you're suffering from like athlete's foot or something like that, it's definitely, you want to keep it dry is kind of the process on that one.
I believe you also use ankle and wrist braces at your clinic. What are those used for specifically?
Yeah, so it just depends kind of what type of injuries that someone's coming in with. Like I do a lot of wrist bracing for carpal tunnel at night. So a lot of carpal tunnel bracing, ankle braces, a lot of athletes for reoccurring ankle sprains. So it just generally depends kind of what's walking through those doors or hobbling, I guess, in some cases. But yeah.
So any final advice on the best care for our feet? I'm thinking maybe at the end of the day, give yourself a nice foot massage to get the blood flowing properly, because we have a lot of nerve endings at the end of our feet, correct?
We do, yeah, and that's why I find reflexology is a good practice as well. Like, and you know, maybe you can convince that special someone at home to give you a foot massage if they will, if they will. But yeah, rolling a ball under your foot at the end of the day can definitely help loosen all of that walking that you've done, because your feet are important, and it's unfortunate when they do start to hurt. You don't realize how annoying it is when they do.
Absolutely. Emily Soper is a certified podorthist and owner of Nexus Orthotics. Thanks so much for joining us today from Medicine Hat, Alberta.
Thank you so much for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.